Modern materialism has made its imprint on us that we have a particular trajectory in life, a purpose. And that purpose is, as you know, to look good, to gain wealth, to be successful, to receive as much praise as you can have, and to have as many pleasures as possible. And that's all she wrote. That is the modus operandi of the secular Western industrial mentality. That's the whole game, from cradle to grave, seeking as many pleasurable experiences and amassing as much praise and amassing much wealth and as many cars and houses and experiences as you can before you die. And that is all contained or hinged upon a nihilistic paradigm, one in which there's a beginning at conception and there's an end when the brain activity, the electric activity in your brain diminishes at death. That's all she wrote, folks. So get it on. But it's from a Buddhist perspective, it's extremely sad. It's actually a very sad condition because it fails to recognize who you really are, that you're not just one life. You have multiple lives. You're a soul that's inhabiting form, and that you have much greater purpose than accumulating wealth and acquisitions and pleasurable experiences, and that you don't recognize that you're creating causes and conditions that will determine your future life. And so it's from a Buddhist perspective, our current predicament as Western secular modern industrial society hinged upon nihilism is actually an anorexic, a severely scarce mentality that is actually creating its own degeneration or de-evolution. We're actually devolving from that perspective because we don't recognize that the things that we do while we're grabbing and obtaining and fighting off and defending, we don't realize that we're actually contaminating a perfectly amazing life. And we're actually setting ourselves up for a devolution.
What do we do?
Oh my God, Mike! I don't have a definite answer for this. I don't have a confident. Yeah, here's what I do. I've struggled with this, and I'm like adapting as we go along. I mean, there's so many threads to what you're talking about. Okay, for first and foremost, like we were talking about a pandemic, but we're also talking about information age. The information age has just hit an all-time new epic thrust of confusion, where just like even basic news facts.
Yeah.
Hold on. I mean, you could just see how confused I am. I mean, we can't even say even for sure about concrete facts anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, Did he have a gun? Did he not have a gun? Like, what actually happened? You know what I mean? And so, I have become enormously suspicious of any kind of news, and I think the most dangerous thing that people can do is fall prey to an echo chamber of some leaning, whether it be a far left leaning or far right leaning. I mean, I think that's the most dangerous, and I think that's what the preponderance of, let's just say, North America is caught in, which is why it all comes down to red or blue or black or white or whatever. It's so bifurcated and so polarized because I think there's just the spinning of the narrative and a insular echo chamber where all your feed, if you just side on one side, because that's your tribe, and then you build a castle around you and you feed the information streams from just certain sources, then I think it has a very powerful and very subtle, compelling amplification process on your psyche. And I think that has somehow very recently, just magnified itself on the world stage. Like I feel like that technology must be part of this amplification process. So one thing that I do is I don't trust any sources anymore. I don't trust any one particular person. I've shut out all the news a long time ago throughout the television. So then people say, oh, you're so ill-informed. And then my counter to that is I'd rather be ill-informed than be so manipulated by one side. But just to keep myself somewhat current, I trade bits of information from what I would perceive as one side with little bits from the other. So I try to formulate the best that I can do to insulate my mind is stay centrist, to try to stay even keeled, to recognize that both sides are in a way just very egregiously self-absorbed in their own narrative and spouting some kind of death threat at the other camp. I try to just, if something happens, I try to get a little bit from both sides so that I can just sort my way through. In other words, I try not to live in an echo chamber. But then at the end of the game, at the end of the day, rather than get pinballed back and forth, and he said, she said, they said, we said, I also take a step back and I say, even if there's some truth to one side or the other, it's still within the samsara making apparatus of delusion. Okay. It's still within the grips of delusion. And this is where the ancients had it right. I mean, it may be that technology has amplified and ramped everything up, but even underneath it, there's always been tribalism. There's always been she said. There's always been violence. There's always been inequality. There's always been this and that. And I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't make attempts to repair those things. Of course we should. But it's so blatantly obvious to me that if you get caught in the thrust and the crest of the wave of that delusory, divisive energy, that you're still playing the death game that Joseph Campbell was talking about. You're still in the throes of not recognizing that you're a creator. You're part of the problem. In other words, even the shadow side, for example, of social justice is that people that get on their high horse and pound their chest and point fingers, and even if they're rightfully calling for real justice that does need to happen, there is this shadow side that fails to recognize that the vehement opposition and call for death is equally misguided, is still part of the samsara making apparatus of the delusion or hallucination of separation.
Yeah.
And so, yes, you can go for who's really right and who's really wrong. And maybe there is a who's really right and who's a really wrong. But then if we don't take a big step back and take a big breath of fresh air and really analyze within that chess game, are we still being misguided ultimately? And that the only thing that can solve that are the wisdom traditions that recognize the big game. Big game. How do we know for sure that the people that are calling for justice or the people that are going to do so much better when they get what they're asking for? How do we know that the pendulum just doesn't swing, and once they have power, then there's another hierarchy, or when the men are dethroned, that the women come into power, that they're going to be that much better? And we don't, from a spiritual point of view, as long as living beings are guided by the hallucination of separateness, the game doesn't change.
There it is. Yeah.
The powers that be are forcing us to look in the wrong direction. Okay, right now everybody is stuck to the television or the internet and is following the debates between these two white elderly oligarchs. Doesn't matter whether they are red or blue, liberal or Republican, they are cut from the same fucking cloth. And what they represent, despite their differences, is the old establishment, the old guard, the old boys club. They are both part of that. And so what I think is actually happening is, while that whole stage is set and while those theater actors are playing their parts, something else is actually happening that actually deserves much more of our attention. Because come November 3rd and their election bell sounds, to me, it doesn't really matter which one of these two monkeys are in play. What matters more is us recognizing where true power really lies. And let me give you a very clear example. Since the death of George Floyd, what have we recognized, if not the fact that when enough people come together and raise their voice and focus on a particular issue, the push thrust forward of the giant wave of popular interest and popular demand for justice is capable of circumventing and changing the conversation regardless of who is in office. So we can focus on Daddy in the sky who is sitting in the throne with chalice and scepter, or we can remember where the power really lies. And this, the old guard and the old structure and the old patriarchy that runs oil and corporation and aristocracy and banking and all of the rest of governance that is completely corrupt, whether it's blue or red, is beginning to come undone. And what is emerging at the very same time as those powers that be double down, as they double down and call in the guard, what is happening is that people around the planet, whether it be in Lebanon, in Syria, in Venezuela, in the Balkans, in the Arab Spring, what people are realizing is that that top-down structure is being slowly replaced by a large-scale people's movement. Ordinary people like me and you have a small little awakening, which is a giant leap forward when it comes to critical mass of people demanding, and not being bullied. We are not going to be bullied, and we have much more power. And whatever puppet government wants to sit there and pull strings can do that. We don't have to actually change that. What we cannot afford to do is lose our momentum and lose our vision and lose our passion and lose sight of the fact that each of us is incredibly powerful as a people. And so that changes the structure from a pyramid scheme to a grassroots movement. And so that is the future. That is what's and it's happening simultaneously or concurrently. It's like you see the oligarchs, Erdogans and Putins and Trumps, they're doubling down, but then the people, ordinary people, are banding together. And so what if both unfold simultaneously as one deck of cards crumbles, another one gains its conviction? There are cycles in nature. There are cycles in time. There are cycles in civilization. This is the apocalypse. Apocalypse, the actual translation for apocalypse, is the great revelation. And we're in a great revelation. What is a revelation? A revelation is a seeing something through the veils. Mm-hmm. And we are seeing how our civilization is a complete and utter fabrication based on hedonic pleasure principle seeking that has marginalized 99% of the population and left them to be a battery to energize the cream of the top, and
who are more miserable than the people who are the batteries, ironically.
I don't even know if they're miserable. They're so our fascination with zombies tells me that at the top they're not even feeling anything. They're lifeless creatures who are living a complete and utter fantasy of disconnection, not only from others, but of their own bodies and selves. But irrelevant. And that's what we are right now. We are a civilization in transition. How many of us are willing to take on the responsibility of leadership, have a vision, and draw on the well of positive inspiration and energy, industrious to build a new future that we might not be the recipients of, but future generations will. One that is socially just, for example, one that is not reliant on exploiting the external or plundering the external resources, one that favors localization from globalization. Are we going to implement all the lessons that we learned if we are to study our history in order not to repeat it? This is the time in the between. This is the time to get clear.
This is the time to listen to all the Corey Allen podcasts with all the visionary people that you've invited on. What are they all saying? This is a time to return to the sacred wisdom knowledge and ask them, what are they saying during the dissolution? What is next? What does it mean to live together on this planet? How do we live? And then execute on it. Build your homestead. Find your plot of land, build your greenhouse, learn how to return to the earth, learn how to trade, learn how to not be reliant on the banking systems, learn how to not be so trusting of unscrupulous, unethical leadership from both sides of both camps. Learn how to disengage and find swaths of 250 people that will work together to create sub-communities of like-mindedness. And then let those sub-communities of like-mindedness learn to live in peace with the other sub-communities, but leaving them to their own value system and respecting their own value system. So you're going to start building a cathedral block by block, and you'll never be there to see the end result, but your children will continue to build it. So start the foundation good. Start a good foundation for a cathedral that you'll never get to see the end, knowing that your heirs will be bequeathed the result of your labor. So build well.
The way to make your life meaningful, the way to make your life your spiritual outlet is to conjoin it, is to use the art, to come back and use the art. Use art to make life your yoga. So come back and use your creative potential. So this is why you need teaching, because it's like they hand out driver's licenses in this country, but where the fuck are they handing out licenses to use your fucking mind? I mean, we are walking around with a loaded weapon. Our minds are like loaded weapons. We go to school in these, we fucking sit down and shut the fuck up for 25 years and get 3 degrees, and no one discusses how to put the pin back in the hand grenade of the heart. No one talks about the fact that an unchecked mind is the most loaded, deadly weapon that all of us possess. Where is the school for consciousness? I mean, without a wisdom tradition, we are fucking lost.